We will begin the process, and we will start on the Senate side with Senator Thomas.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank everybody for being here today. Appreciate this nice big crowd, and appreciate the opportunity to have these meetings. My district is 49, which is Posey County, parts of Vandenberg, and parts of Gibson. The committees that I'm on is corrections and agriculture, natural resources, and technology and utilities. So far, the only committee meeting I've had was last week was a corrections committee, and we had some bills that was introduced, and a couple of them passed. Some of them went to back for amendment changes to the measures. But as a freshman legislator, there's not a great deal I have to report other than this is a real new experience, and it's sort of like being put behind the controls of a 747 and being told fly the folks where they want to go. But I'm trying to learn. There's a lot of formalities and protocol, and you try to get all that in at the same time as you're trying to learn the mechanics of this office. So I'll try to answer the questions that you have for me today the best I can. I've had a lot of different groups that have come to me and about their particular issues. And one nice thing about this job, or I should say interesting, is the fact that there's such a horizon of issues out there and topics and subject matters. And all of the people, individuals and organizations and groups that has come to my office or have called me or emailed me, it's interesting that they're interested in a lot of the things that we all talk about, but they have their one particular subject. And for them, that's what they want fixed, or they want it replaced, or they want it inserted, or but it's that subject matter. And so it's kind of impressive to see how many things out here that folks and organizations are involved with. And I'm delighted to be given the opportunity to participate in this process. And so I thank all of those that has allowed me this honor. And with that, I'll quit.
Okay. Thank you. I guess I should first apologize. I think I mispronounced your name.
You know what? Don't feel bad about it, because we've heard it 6 ways to Sundays on how you can pronounce that name. So, it is Tom's, as though the E was silent.
Okay, yeah, I will try to do better, but I make no promises.
That's fine. I have answered to hey you a lot, so that's okay. Don't bother you.
I answer to pretty much anything except late for supper. So just don't call me that. Before we move on to Senator Becker, I will mention to those folks that are standing up, we have empty chairs in the very front row. I know a lot of people don't like the front row, but there's always empty chairs in the front row. So if you'd like to move forward and have a seat, you're welcome to do that. Thank you. Next will be Senator Becker.
Really appreciate all of you being here today, and really appreciate your input on a lot of issues, all of the issues, because it is, I think we do a much better job as your representatives if we hear from you ahead of time and before we vote rather than afterwards, and people say, why did you vote this way? And I know we can't please everybody all the time, but I do value your input very much. And I do have, at the very back, I've got a folder where if you want to sign up for my e-newsletter or regular newsletter by mail, you can do both, and there is a sign-up sheet. I also have some handouts that they have this color, but they're also on the whole back of them is my legislative survey, the online survey. So if you haven't turned that in, or if you haven't seen that and you'd like to fill it out, there's one at the back that you could always fill out and mail back to me as well, because I really do appreciate your input. And I think Senator Thoms talked a little bit about it. It's just the beginning of the session. We're going to be there until at least April the 29th. That's when we sine die, and the budget is the biggest issue that we're going to have, and trying to continue to fund state government at responsible levels and not raising taxes and still providing services is going to be very difficult. I know that the developmentally disabled community over this last fiscal year has seen a $300 million cut just in their funding, and that is very difficult. Education saw a $300 million cut. That's K through 12. And at the same time, the governor's calling for different programs or new programs to on education options. So really appreciate your input on all of those as well. I have filed several bills. One of them is a mental health commission for children. We have tried to do that voluntarily. We've started it here, looking at mental health services for children and also looking at the use of the Evansville Psychiatric Children's Center. Some of you may have seen the article in the paper where the governor now wants to have the ability to close that facility, which I strongly disagree with. We only have 41 beds in the state of Indiana for children that are severely mentally ill. We have 28 here at EPCC, and we have 13 at LaRue Carter in Indianapolis. There are other facilities, and they're private facilities. The closest one to us is Bloomington. And so this facility, the EPCC, is a last resort for kids. They have wonderful programs and they do wonderful work. And this means the difference in a child ending up in our correction system or worse, and having a fulfilling life and being able to get on the right track. So if you have concerns about that, I would certainly encourage you to email the governor and share those concerns with him, because it's going to take people stepping up to prevent this from happening. I also do want to take a moment to announce that I have set up a meeting with EPCC for the local delegation and to go out and see EPCC and see what they do next Friday afternoon at 2 o'clock. So for all of you or any of you that can make it, I encourage you to do so, because you'll have a much better chance if you know what we're really talking about and the services that they provide. And with that, I think I've probably run over, have I?
Yes.
But I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll move to the House side, and we'll start with Representative Bacon.
Good morning. If I did this right. First thing I want to do is apologize if I start coughing or have a little problem. I have a asthma problem. It's due to being allergic to mold and mildew, and they put me in the basement. After a couple of weeks of that, I found out I have an issue. So I'm trying to get over that issue, and they're working on moving me up. So trying real hard. I want to thank all of you for being here. It's great to have this crowd. As I said, we get at least this many people in the hallways at the State House, and all of them are lobbyists trying to tell us what to do and what's going on and so forth, and we don't know anything yet. There's 3 freshmen at this table, and we really, really enjoy being freshmen because they treat us a little bit better, I think, because we don't know where we're going and what we're doing, and so we really, really enjoy it. And at 64, I really enjoy being a freshman. So it's a lot of fun. I've had a little bit more work than some of them at this. I understand the process and what's going on, and like they've said, our biggest issue is going to be the budget, what we can do. We definitely are going to keep Indiana in the black. We are going to do everything we can to keep every program that we have, but we know it's going to be tough and there's going to be difficult decisions to be made. Education is going to be a big issue. That's the 2 main issues. That's the main ones that are on the board. And then all of us have our little things that we want to try and get done. And we're doing that because of our constituents. And it's so good to see all of you here, and this is what we want. All of us want you to let us know what you want, because we represent you. And that's how we got here, and that's what we're doing. The lobbyists and those people up there, we'll listen to them, but they have one focus in mind. And that's really not what our constituents want necessarily. So we want to listen to you, and we want to hear what you have to say. I so far have introduced 4 bills that have actually got out onto the House floor. I did bring some copies of what they are here, so I hope that you pick those up in the back. I won't go into all of them because there's the 3-minute bond, and I always like to try and stay under that. Jim's doing real well about talking now. We've really worked hard at that, getting him down. His 3-minute talks used to be about 30 minutes, so he's doing really well. So I appreciate everyone being here. It's why in the basement. Yeah, I said, Jim, I'm moving up though. So I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Representative Crouch.
Good morning. Try this. Can you hear me? Am I on? I'm not on? Stop it. Okay. Am I on now? Okay. Good morning. Thanks for being here. We have been in session for 2 weeks, and that time period I have spent, thank you, working on the budget on House Ways and Means Committee. It's really pretty interesting. The governor presented his budget proposal on Thursday, and it is a proposal. It's what he's saying should happen, but the House will end up doing their budget, passing it to the Senate. The Senate will then rework it, and then we'll probably go to conference committee and work out all the differences. The revenues have finally started to tick up, but we are nowhere where we should be. Our revenues this year are going to be the same as our revenues were in 2005. Our revenues are projected in 2012 to be the same as they were in 2007. Our budget in 2007 was a little over $27 billion for 2 years. In 2009, it was a little over $27 billion. This year, it's proposed at $28 billion. Now, there are some things we cannot cut. We cannot cut Medicaid. That's an entitlement program, and we have to fund that. We also are funding our pension programs. So those are growing. That's eating up money. What's left has to be spread out over everyone else. And so that is what has proposed or has caused the governor to propose cuts, 3% cut in higher education, eliminating the Lincoln Amphitheater, making cuts in all other areas. Education did not get a cut. Of course, they did get a cut last year, and that has not been restored. So it's going to be very challenging. It's going to be very difficult. We need your input so that we can make the right decisions for our constituents and for the state of Indiana. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Next is Representative McNamara.
Thank you. I echo a lot of the same sentiments that the new freshmen echo. I also had only about 2 weeks really to prepare, so I hit the ground running and haven't stopped. House District 76 is all of Posey County, a couple precincts in Gibson and the west side of Evansville. And I just want to say that I really appreciate the opportunity to serve southwestern Indiana and would like to make every effort to listen to what your concerns are and make sure that we represent those needs that you have. And like Ron said, it's kind of like running the gauntlet trying to get into the House and everybody wanting their issues. But most importantly, it's important for us to know what's on your mind and what issues are important to you. Again, like everybody else, I have surveys that are online. You can fill them out that way, or one was mailed to your home if you live in the district. And in the back of the room are some information on most recent things that we're up to. But we're about 2 weeks in. I serve on the Roads and Transportation Committee, the Government and Regulatory Reform Committee, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Courts and Criminal Code. So 2 of those 3 have met. And the process thus far has been pretty interesting. They've taken us pretty easy. Things will get pretty exciting next week, I understand. So for me, right now, it's getting acclimated to the whole process and just making sure that I emphasize that I want to know what's important to you and that I would like to know what your concerns are and be able to understand what those issues are that are affecting you.
Thank you. Next will be Representative Rican.
Thank you, and I survived. I was the only Democrat. They're wonderful to work with. I want to say that the things that I worked on this summer with the neighborhoods and having to do with drug nuisances, drug nuisance housing, and we have a bill on precious metals that has to do with burglars actually taking some of the gold and taking it to the We Buy Gold places and having those melted down instead of the other ways that they did in terms of fencing. We're working on that. And also on some scooters and moped legislation. I presented to our House, to the representatives, and they've been great. And I'm receiving a lot of cooperation and leadership from the Republicans, and I really do appreciate it. The other bills that I have and working on are children's issues. And we have 3 bills, one of which is sponsored by Representative Davison, and I think that we're going to get our folks here to sign on to those. And then transparency and accountability issues with privatization, as well as the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission. Wanted to say that I do have some informational brochures in the back that I just love to bring. They're on different topics on the state as well as a directory, and they're on the back. I have State House reports that I put out on a weekly basis. That's email. I did print some out from the first 2 weeks on the back, and then all you have to do to get on is it tells you that you just get onto my email site and say that you want that email report, and it just gives you my impression of what has gone on that week, kind of keeps us in touch. I'm going to be doing something a little different with with the survey this year, because we have so many topics that we really haven't been getting in, we haven't gotten to at this point. I want to keep that ongoing. So I'm going to be doing an ongoing online survey, hoping to work out something where I can get it to folks in the community that don't have those services, hopefully through the library. I want to talk to them about it. But this way I can get ongoing responses from folks as to what those concerns are and what those opinions are and those issues. Because I'm really afraid that we're going to see everything coming at the last minute. I was looking at what we had done last year, or the last couple, well, I guess the last year by this time, and we had passed out a lot of legislation, and that's just not happening right now. So I think it's all going to come at one point in time. Looking forward to talking to you all. We've had some good discussions. The vouchers and choice in public school education is major, but probably the most concern I have right now is that I have not seen a job creation initiative on the part of the administration. And if we truly want to bring back revenues in the state of Indiana, we have got to grow jobs. So that is priority, and I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Timing was pretty good. Yes. I've only noticed one former representative in the room. We have had some in the past attend, but one is here today, and I'd like to recognize him. It's the Reverend Phil Hoy. Where you at, Phil? He's waving his hand. He's a former state representative. We appreciate his years of service. A lot of times, sometimes I think that can be fun up there, but other times I think it's not very much fun at all. And but it's still a tremendous amount of work, even when it is fun. So that's my take on it. Anyway, well, it's your turn. We're going to go from side to side, and you just raise your hand. Actually, we're going to start on this side first. We started on this side last time, so this time we're going to start on this side. You'll have a couple minutes to make one issue your case, and then the legislators will have a chance to respond. So I saw a person right over there. Yes. Yeah, please step up to the microphone. Yep. And please state your name, please.
My name is Chris Politano, and I'm from Evansville. And the question that I have, you all have talked about various spending things mostly and bills that you propose. And one of the things that very infrequently do I hear coming from the state level legislators and senators are dealing with issues of freedom. And what I would like to know is not how you're going to do budgets and how you're going to do this, that, and the other thing, but how you're going to look out for the individual rights and hopefully even restore some rights that have been taken over the years back to the citizens of the state of Indiana. And I have a special request for Mr. Toms, because I don't think that he's a one-issue guy, and I would like his issue to not be the Second Amendment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now is responses from the legislators. Anybody want to respond? Since it was mentioned, Senator Toms gets to go first.
Well, unless somebody wants to follow, okay.
You get to go first.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's a good question, Chris, because you know what, I've been involved about freedoms and liberties, and I have a questionnaire too back here. Now, we did a mailing on questionnaires. Some of you may have gotten it, but if you didn't, there's some on the table back here, and there's a few more questions. And I think the bottom question was, do you feel like you have been losing your freedoms and liberties? Because during the campaign, that was something that was amazing to me, and the doors we knocked on, how many folks brought that up, and in particular the elderly people that would, out of the blue, would bring that issue up. Yeah, I can see now in just my short 2 weeks up there that that's going to be something that I'm hoping our legislators will be keenly aware of, that, we've been given, we've had the fortune of being born in a country that has more freedoms and liberties than any other nation on the planet. And sometimes we don't realize how important they are, or how important anything is, until it's gone, with no hope of getting it back. And so it's very important that we make sure we jealously guard the freedoms and liberties that we've enjoyed, and that the Founding Fathers seen fit to establish in our government, in our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, because no other country has a Constitution anywhere similar to what we have. And these issues go on the freedom and liberty aspect. I see topics that are coming up right now that's going to be debated in this session. And it might be everything from, and I know this is sensitive to a lot of people in here, but it'll be the smoking ban. There's one about text messaging. There's issues about what we're allowed to say anymore, and we've seen this now at the federal level. It's been brought up. We see it every night on the news right now about comments and commentaries, so I am very alert to the measures I've seen come up so far. Some of the things we've already had in our committee this past week on some of the bills that was introduced. And I've had a lot of the senators that's got some legislation going, and they've asked me, if I would support it. Some I will, and some I've been point blank that no, I won't, because of certain reasons. And so I'm glad you asked the question, and it's a very, very important issue that we keep in mind, that we don't want to lose what we have now. It's be very careful. That's what I said at the two meetings 2 months ago when we had a meeting. Be careful what you ask for from government, because they will be happy to give it to you or perhaps take it away from you. So be very careful in that matter. That's my comment.
Thank you. There's one thing I forgot to mentioning. It's important to try to be specific. That's a fairly general question, and I can understand the need to ask sometimes kind of general questions. But if there's a particular bill or a particular stance, either a plus or a minus, either support this particular bill or support a particular stance, it's best to come out with that rather than just be kind of general. With that said, other responses from legislators. Representative Regan.
I would say that one of the reasons that I am so strongly in favor of local control, and that is pushing the decisions back to the local, has to do with the fact of maintaining more freedoms and better fitting the style of those of us here in southern Indiana. What I've seen in just the short period of time that I've been in Indianapolis, that a lot of the laws are one size fits all, and that's not necessarily true about at least I think about the state of Indiana and how we feel about legislation. For instance, the local control issue on consolidation. That is something where we want to maintain as much input and freedom of decision, and I'd rather see those kinds of things be made on the local level rather than on a state level.
Thank you. Representative Crouch was next. You okay? Yeah, that's all right. Well, there's always one.
I think that's a good question. Most every bill we pass takes something away from somebody and gives it to someone else, whether that be physical therapists wanting to have full access and not to have doctor's referrals, whether that would be parents wanting to be notified if their child has been arrested on some kind of a charge. So the broad way to look at it is it's a give and take process. I suspect you're referring to our basic freedoms that were established in this country, and I think that's something we all have to be very, very careful and guard, be very guarded in terms of interfering with those basic rights. But in general, everything we do kind of takes away from someone and gives to someone else. That's why there's such big fights up there. Because there's a lot of turf battles. But I think you bring up a good point, and thank you for reminding us of that.
Thank you. Representative Bacon was next.
Thank you. What I'd like to say is, and I forgot to say on my opening statement, is I'm on public health, agriculture, and natural resources, and we've already had probably the biggest issue that's brought up first thing in public health. We had one public hearing, and it was on the smoking ban. We did not get anywhere near completed on that, but we got most of the testimony done. And it's one of the things that does come up on both sides. It is they're trying to take away rights from one to the other. And both sides are doing that issue, as Representative Crouch said. So you have to be very careful on how you do that. And I personally will be looking at that in everything that I look at. That's what I want to let you know, our freedoms. Also, Speaker Bosma did put a committee out, and I have not looked to see what's been done in that committee and what's going on, but one of the committees that he put was to look at rules and regulations that are already in place that are costing taxpayers and costing businesses and costing everyone else more time and more money, and taking away our freedoms, the ability to do business correctly, the ability to do things that we feel are right, and getting it out of the state control. So those issues are on the table, and they're going to look at all the rules and regulations that they can in the time that we have to get rid of rules and regulations. And I think that's one of the best committees up there, because you never see anyone trying to get rid of things. You always see them want to pile more and more on us. So I'm really happy with that. So I'm definitely going to watch that as we go along. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's time to move on to another issue. We're now on this side of the room. I see the first person in the glasses. Yes. Please step up to the microphone and state your name, please, and one particular issue.
Hello, my name is Paul Watzlawick. My wife Holly and I, we own and manage the 4 package liquor stores in Posey County. Well, to be truthful, the banks actually own the liquor store. We just pay the bill each month. My question relates to an issue near and dear to our hearts: it's Sunday sales and cold beer and gas stations. A recent study from Ball State University says that at least 25% of packaged liquor stores will be put out of business if either of these issues is put into law. Since all 4 of our stores are marginal today, we would be forced to close our business. I request that each legislator state their position on Sunday sales and cold beer. If you are for either, please state how you plan to replace these lost jobs. As Gail mentioned, and as I know, since I sent W-2s yesterday, last year we employed over 64 people during 2010. Access across the state, there are 1,100 packaged liquor stores owned by residents of our state by law, and we employ over 10,000 people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So your position is opposing Sunday liquor sales?
Yeah, definitely opposing. It would put most of us out of business.
Okay, one of the things I haven't done, I forgot to do, is I try to ask each time, is there someone that has a different take on the same issue? Not seeing anyone. Responses from legislators, and I see Senator Tomes first. Senator Toms first.
Hey, you will work.
Progress.
Okay. I want to tell everybody here that I'm going to try to be, I'm not a typical politician, and I'm going to be as straightforward as I can, and I'm probably going to get in a lot of trouble over being that way, but that's just how I want to be treated when I was sitting out there, so I'm going to be that way up here. That one survey, on the campaign you get all kinds of surveys, and that was a peculiar one because that was a one-page survey, and it was only about a one-answer survey. Most of them is several pages, several questions. On that, I set that survey aside for a while. It was asking about Sunday sales. Yes, you support it, no, you don't, or undecided. And my first reaction on that was, you don't think 6 days a week's enough to get your booze? Maybe we ought to be thinking more about going to church on Sunday. I'm just telling you. Okay, I'm just being honest with you. Okay, that's fine. You're asking, so I'm telling, okay? And you're welcome to come up and question me. But I'm thinking 6 days is plenty. And as far as the cold beer sales, it was asking for cold beer sales for the supermarkets and drugstores and convenience stores. Well, the liquor stores out here, I know they're struggling because they don't sell milk and bread and gas. And so I wouldn't support that either, because that business, they do employ folks. They do put people to work. And I recognize that it's a struggle for them to stay in operation. So with the big stores, with all of the other products that they can sell, along with beer, just not cold, that no, I wouldn't support that. Now, I know we're supposed to say maybe just give you fuzzy answers so that you're not really sure what we said when we got done. But I'm not like that, folks. And so, and everybody's welcome to disagree with me if they want to. That's my answer.
Okay, thank you. Representative McNamara was next, then Representative Regan.
Okay. Paul, thank you for your answer. And I believe you would stand to lose 35 positions. Is that correct? Just in your jobs?
That's right. We currently pay 35, but throughout the year we pay 64 different
Okay.
times of the year.
Paul sent me an email this week, and so did his wife. Actually, Sunday sales is one of the survey question items that I have on my survey because it's not come up too often as a question, but I know that it's something that's important to a lot of the shops around and very important to the small business owner in our community. And probably most important for me is looking at the states and cross-comparing those states that do have Sunday sales. And I appreciate some of the information that's been sent my way on looking and comparing the states that didn't have Sunday sales, comparing the states that did have Sunday sales. The increase of death rates on Sundays for ones that had just implemented the Sunday sales had increased substantially. I'm looking at those numbers and those statistics, and to me, I'm not willing to risk the lives of Hoosiers at this point to sell liquor on Sundays in that perspective. So far, I haven't seen any statistics from the other side that says that, like Jim, we can't pick it up on Saturdays. And I'm concerned about Hoosier lives, and I'm concerned about our community. But right now, statistics just aren't supporting, in my opinion, loss of jobs and loss of lives.
Thank you. Representative Regan was next, then Representative Crouch.
Just real short, I don't support the Sunday liquor sales. I think we're doing fine. I haven't found anyone and folks that I talked to this summer that were supportive, that felt like we needed to open up to Sunday liquor sales. So good luck to you all in your business.
Thank you. Next, Representative Crouch.
I'm not inclined to expand our alcohol laws at this point in time. My husband and I, one Sunday, didn't have beer. That was back 30-something years ago. It was the only time in 32 years that we didn't have beer on Sunday.
Life is rough sometimes. Representative Bacon, please.
Thank you. And I have seen, it's going to be a real short sentence, I have seen no reason to expand it. And until I do, I won't even consider it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Senator Becker, please.
I don't, that is a question on my legislative survey, and I don't have the results back. I tend to agree with Paul and others that if you can't get it by Saturday, you probably don't need it on Sunday. But I haven't heard from really what my constituents think, and so I do want to hear from them on their survey, but that's my inclination, is to vote no.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on to another issue, and we're on this side of the room again. Saw the hand up right over here in the corner. Yes, in the front row. Please step up to the microphone and state your name, please.
My name is David Elfrick from Vandenberg County. I have a deep and great concern for what our governor is suggesting for changes and attempting to do to our education system. Governor Daniels seems to imply that our public schools do not have good teachers, evidently because test scores aren't what he would like them to be. Vouchers are not the answer for our education woes. Children achieving poorly in school is not the result of poor teaching, ineffective teachers, or collective bargaining. Teachers in low socioeconomic schools work harder for the results they achieve than teachers in higher socioeconomic environments. I know firsthand how this works. I have taught in both situations, and motivating deprived students is far more difficult. Students coming from low socioeconomic environments are more concerned about having something to eat for dinner, if there will be heat in the house tonight, will Dad come home sober? Our teachers in these lower socioeconomic situations are the most caring, concerned, and devoted people in our education system, yet take the biggest beating. Every one of our country's problems seems to be the fault of our poor education system. Our public education system performs better than any system that we have in this country and performs better than any system in any other country. I can say that because we educate and test all of our children, not just the elite. This is why when we compare our test scores to other countries' scores, we always will be on the short end. Anyone who knows about statistics should understand that the average for the whole population will always be lower than the average of the top students. Governor Daniels thinks that class size is meaningless. I wonder if he has ever been in a class with several hundred students in attendance. For classes to be the most effective, they should be small enough for the teacher to provide effective one-on-one attention when needed. When class size is doubled, the problems teachers encounter do not double. They square, becoming 4 times as many, making it far more difficult for teachers to teach and students to learn. Even if we lived in a perfect world, half the students would be below average. That's the way it works mathematically, and there is nothing we can do about it regardless of the intellect of the class. There will never be a situation where every student in the 4th grade in the school system is reading at the 4th grade level. Governor Daniels wants teachers to be paid on the basis of their class's achievement instead of on the basis of experience, training, and education.
Timing.
Good achievement is generated by a teacher's level of experience, training, and education.
Time. Thank you. Thank you. The issue is an opposition to vouchers. Is there anyone with a different take on the same issue? Seeing none, responses from legislators. Somebody had their hand up. I didn't see it. Yes.
My children are in school. I sent them to Christian schools, and I would like to have the vouchers to send them to a Christian school. It's not only that the teachers are doing a bad job. I'm not saying that. I was a custodian in the school system for 32 years. There's a lot of nice teachers. It's just I would like to have the opportunity to send my children with help to a Christian school without having to pay the 100% out of my own pocket.
Okay, thank you. The responses now from legislators. Legislative responses. We'll start with Representative Bacon, then Representative Rican.
Thank you. As I said earlier, this is going to be one of our biggest issues besides the budget, and I'm very happy that you're here to discuss that. I just want to let you know what I've done. I haven't seen any individual legislation yet. I just know what the governor wants. We know what Dr. Bennett wants, and just because that's what they want as a budget and so forth, and it's always proposed, and it's what comes out of the legislation is what we're going to do. So we have to look at every individual bill that comes out there and what programs are going to do to our students and to our teachers and to the whole system. What I've done in the process of finishing up right now, and already started as soon as I was elected, is to set up a committee in my district of teachers, administrators, and in the school system, and parents. So when I see this legislation come down and we're going to discuss it, it's just not going to be me looking at it. It's going to be the teachers, the superintendents, and the parents in my district looking at it to get the input. I feel that it is that important that not just doing surveys is enough. We need to get the input of the people involved, and it's all of the people involved from the top down to the bottom. So that's where I will be on that legislation. So we'll go and see how it comes out. Thank you.
Thank you. Next was Representative Rican.
Thank you. It seemed to me that you were identifying 3 issues that I think are going to be on the table today this year, and one of those was evaluations, the other one was pay, and then the last one I think is the voucher program and just the budget itself. Just to break those down into 3, I think I said earlier one of the principles that I feel that is most successful in our political arena is more control on the local level. So I think at the state level what we can do is set the standards, and how you get to that point needs to be decided on the local level. That's also why I appreciated the conversations I had earlier with some gentlemen from Memorial, because I think that we need to open up and to talk about how we can develop synergies on a local level. First of all, in evaluations, I think we need to look to peer evaluations. There should be accountability, and that accountability should also rest with the principal. So I'm not opposed to that. What we need to do is to be able to look to the local folks, the experts, the parents, the teachers, the administrators, on how you actually reach that evaluation and make it work for your area. The other is it has to do with pay. And I really do have a problem with paying some teachers more for others because they're doing better work, and I'll tell you why, and at some kind of standard. I think you need to pay the good teachers, but if what you need to do is to set up a system where the good teachers are going to impart that information on the other teachers. And there used to be, I remember a long time ago, I think, I should have talked to one of the guys, a program that was a mentoring program. And those that were mentors were paid more because they were imparting their really good experience and knowledge on all the teachers. And I really like that. So yes, if they're paid more, but there has to be a benefit to all the teachers for that pay. And the voucher system, I think that we have got to concentrate on the real problem, which is the education for all the students. Until we really find out and address how to make our public schools better, why is it that we're saying we're going to throw it all to the wind and we're just going to turn our schools into private schools? I don't think that is answering the issues for our children, and I think that's what we really need to deal with, is public education and come up with the best system that meets the needs of our children. And vouchers, I do not think, meet the needs of our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Senator Thoms.
David, I just want to answer your question from a purely observation standpoint, because this is new to me, and the topic is brought up every day so far that I've seen up at the State House. And I know there's a lot of folks that's working on this, and those that are directly involved in what direction this is going to take. Things we've got to recognize is that Indiana ranks, I think, somewhere in the middle of the states on education, and the country as a whole, I believe, out of the 36, I've seen this, I may be wrong, out of the 36 industrialized nations, we rank about middle on that too. I know some folks get sensitive there as though they're being singled out on the product that comes out of our schools, that the level of education our kids are coming out of school with. There's a lot of factors that play into this from my standpoint of observing the comments and listening to the discussion. And I got the sense that what we'll have to do is identify each of those factors. And I know, as you pointed out, some of the households that these kids come from. Some of them are drug addiction parents, or maybe they're not even living with their parents. They're living with a foster parent or somebody that will watch after them. But and there are bad teachers out there, and there's good teachers. It's like in the private sector. There's some people that are good employees and some aren't. And if you want a company to do well, you'll have to have people that perform well. And it's no different with the schools. So that's my take on it. And I'm just going to have to, I guess, see as this thing progresses along on what they come up with. But there's a lot of things that I've seen so far that indicates to me that hopefully they'll come up with a solution that'll be agreeable to everybody. I'm hoping. It's strictly an observation right now.
Thank you. Next is Senator Becker.
I guess this is, I would like, I think most of us don't get enough information on what other countries are doing. And David, it's my understanding that in China, which they tout, a lot of the national figures and the governor even touts China, that our kids don't compete. But it's my understanding in China, if you don't reach a certain level by the 8th grade, you don't get to go on to college or high school. And so we aren't comparing apples to oranges. And so I would appreciate any feedback, more information on that issue from any of you in the education field you can share with me. I will also tell you that I am very concerned about a lot of these proposals. I am certainly open to examining them, but as I said when asked, I want to hear from my constituents. The one thing that happens when you get a survey is you get a small answer, and it doesn't tell you that, yes, in order for us to afford vouchers, we have to take money away from the current public school system to do that. And that's after we've already cut education by $300 million this year, and that cut is not going to be restored. So it's not only $300 million this year, it's another $300 million next year. And so, folks, we have already cut. When Bob Orr developed the A+ program in 1998, he did it with the idea that we want to help kids. And so we have this diagnostic tool that we're going to use. And so that we can see iStep. And we want to see how kids are doing so that we can use that as a tool to help kids, to help children. We, at that time, we funded remediation 100%, and I don't have the figures right in front of me. I've got them in my desk at the State House, but I can tell you we have cut millions, multi-millions. We have very little funding that now goes into helping kids who do not perform well on iStep because we no longer fund remediation to even a third of the level that we did back in 1998. And yet we're saying to teachers and to schools, we expect you to perform better, even though we're not funding the things that make it perform better, including early childhood education, which is critical. It is critical. As far, thank you. We have also cut funding from mentoring programs, from teacher to teacher, and yet everybody says, well, yeah, let's mentor. Well, we've cut that. Professional development. We don't fund professional development any longer for teachers, and yet we expect teachers to be more professional. We expect them to know the latest things, not to take into consideration when the governor says class size and poverty doesn't matter. I'm not sure where he lives, but I don't think it's in the area where I live. And I also want to say about merit pay that Vanderbilt has done a study on merit pay, and I have the results of that study. And I would just tell you that I'll be willing to share it with anybody that merit pay has not been successful so far to date anywhere. And so I'm certainly willing to be open and to look at the issues, but I have a lot of concerns when we are still not even funding remediation for kids back in 1998 levels, let alone in 2011 levels. Thank you.
Thank you. Last comment from Representative McNamara.
Usually when there's an education question, people point to me. For those of you that might not know, I'm administrator with the Evansville-Vandenberg School Corporation. And so I take to heart a lot of the questions, comments, and concerns because my teachers have them in my building. They come to me with questions of what does this look like and what does this mean for my future. Like Ron, I haven't seen any of the proposals. I've heard the proposals. Some of them concern me, just the way that they're written. I've lived it. I taught in a school that has low SES. I have students that have that as part of their life right now. I have students that don't live with their parents. And I reflect back when I see a lot of this, and the one thing I think of, and I wrote down here, is it takes a village to raise a child. And we need a community to come in and help raise our children, not just put it all on the teachers to make that happen. We have a very strong community in Evansville, Posey County Schools, very, very strong community. But more than anything, I think because I walk the walk and I see a lot of my co-workers out here in the audience, I speak from the heart when I say teachers just want to be treated as professionals. They just want to be recognized for what they do and what they do well. And I don't know about the proposals. I haven't seen them. There are some that I would tend to favor because that would be better for children. But there are others that I'm going to take pause and look at and really consider and see what it does do to our education of our children. One thing that Representative Bacon, Crouch, Elsperman, and myself, Enrican, Becker, and Toms, we're including all of them. I haven't talked to the other two. We're in the process right now of getting permissions from school corporations in southern Indiana and really getting a sense from the teachers themselves, the principals, the teachers, the PTAs, the school boards. Once we see what these proposals are, once they're in the bills, what your opinion is. We want to listen. We want to know, how does this affect you? And we hope to, in the next week or so, get together. It'll be an online survey and send out. I believe Representative Crouch was going to work on having something placed in the newspaper that would give you access and give you a link to that. It'll take a while to design the instrument. We hope to do that Monday and Tuesday to really get it and get a hold of the bills and the legislation that's out there so that we know that's actually what's in them and really get a true sense from the people that it affects every day of what this means to you and what this means to the education of our youth.
Thank you. We move on to, very quickly, Representative Crouch.
Thank you. I'm kind of up in the air on a lot of these. I also haven't seen any actual proposals. But let me tell you what really bothers me about this issue, as well as many other issues out there. We aren't working together. We aren't empowering people. We're beating up on people. I mean, I think that most of our teachers, I think the vast majority of our teachers do a good job, and so does the public, because that's the way they've responded in polls. Do I think there can be efficiencies and improvements? Of course. I can do a better job. We can all do a better job. So I wish that all the rhetoric wasn't there. I wish that people really would be able to sit down and work together on these issues. And I don't think we have bad teachers. I think we have bad rules and bad regulations, and we don't empower people and give them the tools to be successful. So I would hope that out of this whole exercise that we move more in that direction and less in the direction of trying to divide people. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. It's time to move on to another issue. We're on this side of the room. Saw the gentleman in the middle with the glasses. No, the other. There you go. That's right. Musical chairs. 2 gentlemen with glasses. I need to be more specific sometimes. Please state your name and a single issue, please.
Glenn Kissel. I'm here from Vanderburgh County, and my question is to Senator Toms or the others. Senator Toms, as you may know, the Indiana Constitution, Article 1, Section 32 states, "The people shall have a right to bear arms for the defense of themselves and the state." Now, Senator Toms, there is a local institution of higher education here, and I know of an instance at that local institution of higher education where an individual had asked, who is a concealed carry license holder, has a license for concealed carry arms, and had simply asked to carry his firearm concealed on campus for his own protection and was denied that request. I'm going to contrast that. At that same institution in recent months, among other things, we've been told that if we feel like we're under danger, under duress, under attack, we've been told that our response should be to yell out a pre-planned word indicating that we're under duress or attack. I provide that as a contrast here. So my question for you, Senator Toms, is what efforts over the next year or two will you be making to ensure that people who in fact have a license to carry a concealed weapon, if they choose to, could carry one on campuses here in Indiana, consistent with Article 1, Section 32 of the Indiana Constitution?
Thank you. Is there any different take on the same issue from the audience? Different take on the same issue? I don't see any hands.
Does everybody agree?
No, I see a hand here first. A different take on the same issue.
I do not understand the reason why anyone would need to bring an armed weapon on any campus.
Okay. Thank you. We will now move to responses from the legislators. Okay. He opposed being able to carry a concealed weapon. Okay, you just did. Thank you for your comments. We will now move to responses from the legislators. Since Senator Toms was mentioned by name, you get to go first.
Okay, see, it gets hot sometimes, don't it? Well, folks, that's a good question, Glenn. A few years ago, there was an attempt in Indiana to pass legislation which would allow carry on campus. And the reason is, folks, and I just want to explain this as clear as I can. I'll try to be brief on this, but what we're dealing with here is people with a license to carry handguns. These are people that have proven themselves through the process in Indiana to be considered a proper citizen in order to have that license to obtain that to carry their firearms. Now I know a lot of folks are real sensitive about this, but there's a large picture here you got to understand, and especially what happened in Tucson last Saturday. The armed citizen, the person who has had their background research, they've went through all of the red tape, they've signed all of the documents, they've been examined by the state police, local law enforcement agencies, and everybody in between, that has proven them to be a citizen that is not a danger to society. They have that license to carry that handgun. In a situation like that took place there in Tucson, Arizona, or in particular in Virginia Tech a few years ago, your first responders, folks, and I want to make this clear to everybody, your first responder is that armed citizen. In Virginia Tech, it took 9 minutes for police to show up. 9 minutes. The gunman, Mr. Cho, had 31 people locked in a room for 9 minutes. And he systematically shot one at a time. Now, I want to walk you through this for just a moment. You see people at a range shooting their guns, they've got ear protection on because there's a huge, loud muzzle blast from a gun. Now imagine being locked in a room where there's this gun blast, which is magnified because you're in a closed area. You hear the screaming, the hollering. The individuals in that room know that they are at the doorway of eternity. They're not going home tonight. They're not going to see their loved ones anymore. This is it. Their days have come to an end. And I've asked people when I've talked to schools before about this, imagine you're in that room, and let's say you're victim number 24 in the lineup of the 31. And let's freeze frame it while he's shooting number 23. Let's freeze frame it for just a moment. At that moment now, would you be willing to let someone else in that room have a firearm too, to stop this madman? Would you be willing to do that now? Make up your mind because we're going to start the clock. You've got to understand, folks, people have an imagination that law enforcement is out to protect them. We are not assigned an individual police officer as a guardian angel every day. And if you would ever have the misfortune of finding yourself in a critical situation like that, a tragedy, you would hope that your fellow citizen there would be the one that would save your life long before the 9 minutes would roll around before the police would show up. I just point this out to you. Everybody's entitled to their beliefs on this and how they feel. But I would not want to be a victim. I don't want to be a victim. I don't want to be in that position where I have no way to defend myself. We never know when these circumstances are going to happen. If we did, we'd stop it before. But it doesn't work that way. So before you make a determination on this issue, think about the circumstances we're dealing with. I'm not trying to convert you. I just want you to understand the entire element we're talking about here. This session, I don't know of anything that's being proposed. I think there is one senator that's got a bill that's introduced about carrying to the schools, and this is talking about, I told him I think you need to limit to colleges right now because there's such a, sir, you may laugh about it. It's not a laughing matter. The people in Arizona wasn't laughing about it. And if people's lives are at stake, it's no laughing matter. I don't think it's a laughing matter. But I think there is something on that line for that. That's my answer to it. And laugh as you may, it is a serious matter.
Thank you. Other legislators? Other legislators? Seeing no other legislators, we will move on to a new issue. We are on this side of the room again. I see somebody in the very back standing up. Yes, please come forward and state your name and your new issue, please.
David Coker. I live in the city of Evansville. As a corollary to the statements about the school funding and all of that, at the very first county council meeting this year, Judge Niemeyer indicated that there are 300 children in need of services in Vanderburgh County that are on a waiting list to be placed in foster care, and over 22,000 child support cases outstanding from the previous prosecutor. That was mentioned by Nick Herman at the county council meeting. So I just wanted to throw that out there. 300 children in need of services looking for foster care and 22,000 child support cases that are outstanding right now. That's not the issue I want to talk about. The entire...
Sir, you only get one issue.
Wait a minute. The entire country is right now watching the state of Indiana. Last week, Meredith Whitney, a securities analyst from Wall Street, pointed out twice that the state of Indiana is on the verge of changing state law to make it easier for local municipalities and counties and school corporations to declare bankruptcy. And the bill is Senate Bill 105. It is currently being sponsored by Senator Charbonneau. It's been referred to the Judiciary Committee, and it's basically going to make it easier for local units of government to declare bankruptcy on the debts that they've created. In years past, you know that I've been very critical of this situation. We've made it entirely too easy for local units of government to end around rules to create bond issues like the Arena project that was passed because it was in a TIF, and other instances where school corporations have taken schools and put them in shell corporations where they could float bonds against them. We've made it entirely too easy for local units of government to borrow money, and now we're going to make it easier for local units of government to declare bankruptcy.
Okay.
I don't think that's
Time.
good public policy, and I think
Your time is up. Thank you. We have the issue is opposed to Senate Bill 105, which allows it to be easier for local governments to declare bankruptcy. Is there anyone who has a different take on the same issue? Seeing no hands, responses from legislators, please. Any? So represent.
We're not familiar with it.
Oh, okay. Senator Becker.
David, I appreciate your input on both the foster care and as well as child support. Unfortunately, in the state of Indiana, we only collect about less than 50% of child support that is owed custodial parents. And that really weighs heavily on a lot of other systems that are necessary to help families where child support's not being paid. So it is a real issue. And foster care, I think one of the real problems we have with DCS, which is the Department of Child Services, is that, and I think they've kind of backtracked on this, but they were going to cut funds to parents who, with foster children, as well as parents who adopt children with special needs. And there was a lawsuit brought, and I think the state's backed off on that. But Judge Niemeyer is right, and Judge Niemeyer is also on this Mental Health Commission for Children, and strongly agrees that EPCC needs to be there, and actually we need more services rather than less. But getting on to your easier to declare bankruptcy for debts created, and I have shared with you in the past, I shared some of the concerns about a lot of the public debt because it's easy to go into debt. It's a lot harder to pay it back. But I don't think we ought to be making it easier to declare for local communities to declare bankruptcy. I haven't seen the bill yet. I've only seen the title. It's not in a committee yet that where we've heard it. But I would be very reluctant to allow local units of government easier ways to go bankrupt.
Thank you. Senator Thoms.
Well, on the foster care, I just want to mention that our oldest daughter and her husband have foster cared for several years, and I know how important that program is. In fact, they wound up adopting two of the little ones that they had been foster caring for, so I do have a little connection with that. On your issue of bankruptcy, too, I'm kind of concerned about what local government's been doing about starting these projects with no money in hand. I don't think any of us live like it, and I'm a little concerned about how quickly they're willing to start a project at the expense of the taxpayer out here that's going to foot the bill on these things. And I'm also got a problem with some of the TIF programs and how they're used. I think they're abused anymore. I think that initiative began in California back in the late 50s, and it's got some good aspects to it. But there are some cons to the TIF programs, and I think that when a city will use a TIF program and engulf huge blocks of an area, they've overextended, and a lot of times in these TIF projects too, the taxpayers are the ones that wind up getting bled on these things, and the investors wind up getting their money off the top before the taxpayer ever does, if they do. So, when cities or a local unit of government doesn't really have any constraints, they can get themselves in these kind of debts, and then who pays? I think the folks in this room winds up paying for it. So I haven't seen the bill either. I didn't even know that bill had been proposed, but I'm interested to see exactly what the language is in it too. But I'm not in support of allowing, giving them blank checks is what we're probably doing here. So.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other responses, we'll move on to another issue. We're on this side of the room.
I've always been very proud of Indiana for always having a balanced budget, and I wish our federal government could do the same thing. And so I know that there's got to be cuts. When there's not money there, you can't spend it. But one of the cuts that are being brought up is to cut podiatry. And I want to just bring up a study that was an independent study that was done by Tompkins and Reuters. And it was a study across the board. It wasn't just Medicaid. It was Medicare, private insurance. And it showed that for every $1 of podiatric care that was spent on diabetics are prone to foot problems, ulcerations, a lot of hospitalizations, and amputations. So for every $1 on patients under or over 65, there was a savings of approximately $10. And for patients under 65, the savings was approximately $50. So if you cut podiatric care from Medicaid, you're actually going to be losing money. Another way to look at it is if they're not going to the podiatrist, they're going somewhere else. They're going to go to the emergency room. They're going to go to your MD. And I hate to say this, but we podiatrists are paid on a lower fee schedule than our MDs. So that's another way that you would be spending more money on other places. So I would hope that you would consider continuing podiatric care for our Medicaid patients because a lot of them are diabetics. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The issue is opposed to cuts from podiatry services from Medicaid. Is there anyone with a different take on the same issue? Seeing no hands, time for responses from legislators. Representative Crouch first.
That cut was in the governor's proposed budget, and also cut dental, a number of other services to Medicaid patients. That's just his proposal, so we'll be looking at that. And the savings by doing that is pretty minimal in comparison to the whole big picture. And I hope that we aren't penny smart and dollar dumb on that issue.
Thank you. Next is Senator Thoms, then Representative Rican.
Well, I know that there's been proposals on cuts on that and some of the other aspects of medical health care. I hope, too, that we're very careful on where we start out on this. It's interesting that there was a story this week where, our state is struggling to try to tighten where we can. I still believe we need to look at where our water leaks are at, where our money's flowing and it shouldn't be. The story that appeared this week was a story about a gentleman in Gary, Indiana, that had built the Medicaid here in Indiana out of $2 million. And it set up according to the report, set up a fake ambulance service and was sending in these bills. He didn't have no personnel that he claimed was on the ambulance. In fact, there was never an ambulance run, according to the report. And $2 million is not pocket change to me. Now, when we're struggling to tighten up and make cuts, I'm thinking before we do anything like that, we need to observe and see if there's not more of this going on. I'm sure there is. I just got a feeling there is anyway. I shouldn't say I'm sure, but I got a feeling. And I think before we start whacking away on some of these other programs right now, we might ought to take a look at these kind of cases to see that that might not be the approach to make first.
Thank you. Representative Rican is next.
Well, I'd just like to echo what Representative Crouch has said, and also to mention that it's going to be this give and take. We understand that every time that we want to put a dollar back in, we have to take a dollar out. And when I first looked at, and I think this article might have been in the paper, it was in one of the papers regarding the Public Deposit Insurance Fund, being on financial institutions last year, we developed a system to better collateralize those deposits with our local banks and protect your investments. And I think that where we take $200 million out of that fund's probably okay, because I'd rather see the $200 million go into Medicaid.
Thank you. And next is Senator Becker.
I think all three of the responses you received, including Senator Tom's, I think we need to look. We do have a Medicaid fraud unit with the Attorney General's office, and we also have some pretty strong fraud statutes on the books, and I think we need to be looking carefully to make sure that cases like Senator Tom's talked about are not occurring in other parts of the state, because I do think it would be penny wise and pound foolish for us to cut dental care, podiatry care, chiropractic care even, because you're going to end up, if you don't have those kinds of sources, and are we going to say to people that are on Medicaid, sorry, you're on Medicaid, so you're not eligible for teeth anymore? So how we expect them to eat, and if they don't have teeth to properly chew food, it's going to cause other health issues where they're going to end up in emergency rooms or hospitalization, which will cost the state more money in the long run. So I think we have to be very careful, and it is a very small percentage of dollars that you would save in doing this. So I do appreciate you being here, Dr. Koch, and presenting that issue to us as well.
Thank you. Next is Representative Bacon.
I just want to reiterate what Senator Becker said, and being in the healthcare field as a respiratory therapist and a home medical equipment company owner, Medicare and Medicaid has been trying to cut the small individuals, let's cut out of podiatry, let's cut out of chiropractic, let's cut out of the DME companies. We are so insignificant to the budget. It's just, it looks good maybe on paper on a fiscal side, but it really is not. So, and being on a public health committee, I'm sure it's going to end up being there where so I'm going to look at that very closely and bring my expertise to that issue, and that's why I'm glad I'm on the public health issue, because we do got to take care of our constituents and our other residents and make sure that they get all the care that they need. And as I said, the fraud and abuse is rampant, and I know that very well, and you can't get the right people you can even turn them in. We do that on a regular basis, those of us who operate correctly in the way it's supposed to be done, and it doesn't get looked at. It's too insignificant for them to look at. So we need to look at those areas, and that's one of the things I really want to look at. The fraud and abuse is right here. It's right here in this town, and I can tell you exactly who it is, and I won't, because that's not my job to do that, but it's to report them to the proper authorities, but it doesn't get looked at. So we need to push a little harder in that area, so we will. Thank you.
Okay. Come on, tell us. Okay, apparently not. It's time to go to this side again. See right up here in the front, the lady on the corner. Please step forward and say your name and a single issue, please.
My name is LaVon Miller. I'm from Evansville. I would like to know why we are continuing to support the racetracks in Indiana to the tune of $60 million a year out of casino funds. I understand that originally occurred when legislators did a tit for tat, if you support this, we'll support this kind of thing. But that was way back in 1995 or about that, when casinos came into use in Indiana. And I'd like to know, why can't we use that $60 million or even the reduced proposal $40 million for like all-day kindergarten or preschool education? Seems like a much better use of the money.
Thank you. The issue is opposition to supporting racetracks with casino funds. Is there anyone who has a different take on the same issue? Seeing no hands, it's time for legislators' response. Representative Crouch first, then Representative Becker. I'm sorry.
I agree.
Well, that was quick. I didn't even correct my mistake in time for that. Representative Reekins next. Then.
I agree too, Representative. How it got started, as I understand, is they truly were trying to build an industry in the state of Indiana at that time. I didn't do it. Okay, because I looked on that, and I served on a gaming interim committee this summer, And I saw where the factions within that whole racehorse industry were fighting one another for their piece of the pie. And upon question of that, what I found out was that it really was built into there. They're taking the slots at the racehorse casinos. They have the slots right there. They were taking part of that revenue, a majority of that revenue, to build racehorse industry in Indiana. A lot of dissension as to whether or not that's happened, will happen in the long run, but that's why. But I agree. Let's put that money where it can be used the best.
Thank you. Next is Representative Bacon.
This is something as a freshman, and those of us who don't always pay attention to what's going on in the rest of the state, I just saw this 2 days ago, and I was appalled at that we're subsidizing race horses. So anyway, I tend to agree with Representative Crouch. I agree.
Okay, thank you. Senator Becker, please.
I agree as well, but I also, just to tell you the history, the reason that it was there is because the former senator who chaired the Senate Finance Committee was a horse track supporter, and that was the way that they got casino language passed. And we've tried for years to get it changed, and there are several bills coming before the Public Policy Committee that deal with horse tracks, and there are concerns about right now that you have both horse tracks are in trouble financially. I think they're both either close to bankruptcy or maybe even in bankruptcy. I'm not sure. So it will be an issue that we will see. And now I think there's legislation that would allow one horse track to take over the other horse track. And so there's not consensus on that. But with the fundamental question you ask, I agree with that. And I've also tried to explain, unfortunately, that's the way some things happen in the legislature, because that was the only way that casino, just to get the referendums to the public, was ever going to happen.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to another issue. We are now on this side of the room. I see the person right here. Yes, you're standing up. Please step up to the microphone and state your name and a brand new issue, please.
My name's Ray Brown. I'm a retired federal employee, and my issue is we would like to have tax parity with at least Social Security recipients. There are three different groups of retired taxpayers: the ones on Social Security, railroad retirees, and the civil servants. The railroad retirees is the most generous, and then the Social Security is basically whatever you get. Social Security is exempt, and basically federal employees get no exemption. There are bills. We have bills in the Senate and the House which would phase in tax parity over a period of like 5 years, and with several, they're a little more complicated than that. It wouldn't give us tax parity. It would give us something like $10,000 tax exemption after 5 years on our pension. They're like the different bills are different, but that's what we would like to have is tax parity with Social Security recipients. Thank you.
Thank you. The issue is civil service retirees looking for tax parity with Social Security retirees. Is there any different take on the same issue? Seeing no hands, it's time for responses from the legislators. We'll start with Senator Becker.
I appreciate you being here, Ray, and that issue has been around for a long time, and I don't recall right now what the fiscal impact of it is. Do you know?
No, there are in these bills, though there is
There's a fiscal note.
I'll give you a copy.
Okay. If you just want to email me and let me know what that is, I can just tell you that it's a good idea, and philosophically I support it. Whether or not it ever gets a hearing in this year, with what, as Representative Crouch said, when our revenues are still at 2005 levels, and we're talking about all these cuts to various aspects of state government, it's very doubtful that it's going to happen. Philosophically, I think it should happen because I think we're discouraging seniors from living in our state by not providing tax parity with Social Security recipients, but I'm not sure that this year it's going to happen.
Thank you. Senator Thomas was next.
Well, thanks, Ray, for bringing it up. I know that there's been some discussion about the effects of not having tax exemption on those pensions, but I know that, as Senator Becker said, with money being tight, anything that affects the income revenues is going to be closely watched. But there's an aspect that was pointed out that a lot of people that move out of the state of Indiana after they retire, like Kentucky, just avoid that taxes. And when they move, that impacts their spending in our state. So there's an offset, and I hope that they look at this closely to see, and if you can send me those numbers too, because I know there are some figures out there that shows the impact when people do leave this state and move elsewhere just to avoid that income taxes on pensions.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to another issue. We are now on this side of the room again. Saw a hand up with the brown sweater toward the back. I guess that's a sweater or jacket. At least a brown sleeve anyway. Okay. It's brown. I'm just working on brown. Thank you. Please state your name and a single issue, please.
My name is Brad Hampton, and I'm here to talk about the right to work law. I'm against it, number one. If you go to your computer, punch in right to work, you'll see states that already have this. It'll take over $2 an hour from the people that are doing the jobs. And I don't know about you, but in the last probably 50 years, there has not been any legislation supporting the working man and helping them to get a better wage. So I just want to hear your take on what you think about the right to work law.
Okay, thank you. The issue is opposition to right to work law. Is there anyone with a different take on the same issue? Yes, I see the lady right here in the front.
I'm Carol Davis with the Child Organization, and the FSSA at one time was our largest state agency. We had over 10,000 employees, and we also were number one in the entire country in child abuse, sexual abuse, and child abuse deaths. There was not anything that came out of that because it was so horrendous that they didn't want to make it known. And the legislators and the politicians...
How does that relate to right to work?
Because I just think that the unions, the collective bargaining, protected the unions instead of the children.
Okay, we have a different take on the same issue. Thank you. It's time for responses from legislators, please. One more. Go ahead, one more. You have about 30 seconds.
Okay, Texas is a right-to-work state, and they are having a large increase in the number of jobs.
Thank you. We are now into responses from legislators. Senator Thomas.
If you want a job that makes a lot of friends and enemies at the same time, run for office, okay? This is a very divisive issue, and Governor Daniels, I was glad to see him point out that he would like it to be left alone for this session so they can focus more on the budget because it can pull people apart, and we can get sidetracked. You see what happened in the House the first day because this was the issue that brought them to out of their seats. But I want to explain to you my position again, clearly, so you know where I'm at on this thing. And I'm not here to make anybody mad at me, but I guess there's folks that's going to be feeling that way. On the right to work, right now in our country, it's about 50-50. I think there's about as many states that have right to work laws as that do not. The problem with right to work is you're taking, when you allow right to work laws, you're taking away from somebody, as Representative Susan Crouch said earlier. Organized labor in this manner here, they establish a contract between the employer and the employees. It's agreed upon. And in that contract, there's benefits that go with it, wages, working conditions. And the folks that are involved in it enjoy the benefits of that contract. The employees are protected to see to it that the contract is honored by both sides. When you have right to work laws, what you do then is you handicap those that work very hard to secure a good wage. Because what you allow then is for people in a right to work state to work in an employment area and enjoy all of the benefits, because that's the way it's written, that the unions must offer the same wages, the same job protections. Now, there might be some exemptions where, let me, before I get ahead of myself, a person that can, in a right to work state, can opt not to pay union dues, but yet benefit from all of the contract negotiations that was put together. And what you have then is a breakdown. I mean, it is not fair for all of the work that went into securing these kind of working conditions, and yet somebody else comes along and reaps the benefits without supporting those that work for that effort. And you begin a process of deterioration on in right to work laws in states that have right to work laws of wages and working conditions. That's just the way it works. And so I don't support right to work laws for that reason, because a person that does not particularly want to belong to a union, they have all the freedom in the world to seek employment anywhere they want that is not a organized company. That's a freedom we talked about earlier here in this room. So there's just that. That's just a major aspect of right to work, is that in right to work states, people that opt out of the union still benefit from all of the contract negotiations that went with that. So I oppose that.
Okay, thank you. Next is Representative Rican.
Okay, thank you. I don't support the right to work. I mean, that's been from the very beginning, and the reason, there are a couple of reasons. One has to do with my history in management and having to do with the Parks Department. I found that when we had grievances, those grievances were worked out. Sometimes I won, sometimes I lost, but it was always good to know that the worker had representation. And when it came down to a point that there was a real serious problem with the worker, it wasn't the union that was the problem. It was our own policies and procedures that I had to work against within our administration. What I see is that there can be a growth in the worker and on the job with the support of the union, because they can present the best worker at the best time, and I think they become people that you can work with, and I feel very, very strongly about that. As well, there are a couple statistics. Number one, that the states that have right to work now also have better than a 51% safety issue going on in their states. I'll give you that one. And another one is that in those right to work states, that their average income on their wages is $5,000 less than the other states. So those aren't directions that I think we want to go. We want to have safe states, want to have better wages, and that's what we need. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Representative Bacon, please.
First thing I want to let you know is right now I'm undecided on that issue. Number one, I think it was in the last 10 days of the campaign was the first time I've heard the word right to work, and it was at a union campaign thing. So personally, I didn't know anything about it. I got educated that night pretty good, because I asked, and so there was no problem for them telling me what it was. Secondly, on this same issue, on the first day of legislators met this year, some of you are aware of that, the other side tried to bring up a procedural area to force all of us to vote on right to life, or right to work, I'm sorry. excuse me. But we were, all this was, they were passing bills down by number. All of the majority of the legislators had not even seen these bills, did not know the numbers, did not know what was in it at this point. It was to pass it down so that we could bring it to committee and look at it and study it and find out and get educated. That's the purpose of the committee for on first reading, bring it back to second reading, and then debate it. So, as I said, I'm learning on both sides of this issue. So I want you to know that the majority of us, there's many representatives that are very, very passionate about their far right to work, and we've heard that also. But we need to learn and find out why and what their issues are, and we need to know both sides. So my stand is I'm undecided at this point, and I will learn both sides of this issue. But I was not happy about trying to be forced to vote on something I hadn't even seen and knew nothing about. You just don't vote on numbers. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to another issue. I'm sorry.
One more comment on that. Just
Quickly.
Real briefly. One of the statistics has been pointed out that 31% of companies that are looking to move to Indiana pull out because it's not a right-to-work state. There's another way to say that is 69% do.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to probably the last issue. We're on this side of the room again. See the very front. Please step up to the microphone and state your name and a single issue, please.
I'm Dr. Ray Nicholson. I'm the health officer for Vandenberg County. I'm surprised this issue hasn't come up before. It's the question of banning smoking in casinos and bars. This issue, I understand, there's an economic part to it, a very important part to it, and certainly there is a right to your own determination, and that's certainly a very important one to consider. However, it is a health issue, and I don't think any of us realize the enormity of the health issue. When the results came out last year about our county rankings, we were way down because of early death in our community. Smoking is the number one reason why there's early death. And as you pointed out, it's not a laughing matter when we come to health. In 1955, Cecil's Textbooks of Medicine had one paragraph on cancer of the lung, and said cancer of the lung does not exist. Not bronchogenic, there's other forms, but not bronchogenic carcinoma, which to do with smoking. And it came on later, so it's become a health issue. And people don't realize it, but only 5% of people get cancer. You would think it would be higher than that. 95% don't get cancer. Only 15% of people get emphysema. 85% don't. But better than 90% have premature death because of stroke or heart attacks. And what is the number one symptom of a heart attack in a 40-year-old or 45-year-old? You fall over dead. You don't have a second chance. You don't have any warning that this is occurring. So I think it's a very important problem in our nation, very important health issue. And I know that there's a lot of reasons for rights of people, and certainly a big economic impact. I understand that. But health is no laughing matter.
Thank you. I'm looking at that issue. While you didn't use the word support, but I'm thinking that you support banning smoking. I'm going to take that as your position. Is there anyone that has a different take on the same issue in the audience? I see a person over here with a different take on the same issue.
Good morning. My name is David Christmas, and I live here in Evansville. And I had something prepared, but I think I'd rather just kind of respond to the gentleman. Is that I appreciate the statistics on health, but what we're really looking at is what does government have the right? How far do they go and intrude into our lives? Because we still have the free will to go to those places or not to go to those places. So, and I understand that you'll say, well, but that person has to work there. Well, but is the government to require or promise them a job? I mean, that's what we're saying. We're saying the government, you have the right to work there if the government's going to mandate it smoke free. That's the way I understand it. Maybe maybe I don't understand the legislation appropriately. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's time to move to responses from legislators. Senator Toms.
You all got any questions that's really tough and divisive? Okay. I've met with a lot of the folks that's involved in stopping smoking, and I appreciate their work. And I know they've got programs that they've done on the ills of smoking. I mean, I don't think any of us would have any doubts that smoking is not the most healthy thing you can do. Eating cheeseburgers, they say, is not either, but I don't want them to stop me on that. They have hotlines for folks to call in on how they can get off of cigarettes, and that's great, and I support them. And anything I can do in helping that matter, I'd be happy, and I told them that. But I was also very point blank to them on this one here. Now, think of me what you may, but I'm going to tell you what I think. You're asking. And I hope you appreciate that. Maybe you don't. But I'm not really sure that a statewide smoking ban would even be constitutional. I'm not a lawyer, but it just doesn't seem right that any government, any unit of government, can step into a business and tell a business owner that they can have a legitimate product in that business. They don't have a dime invested in that business, and yet tell that person how they're operating and what they can do. I know that it's really ironic that I think the state of Indiana gets something like $468 million in taxes off of tobacco products. I'm not sure if that's correct, but that's what I thought I read. And even some of the groups and advocacy groups that's pushing for the smoking ban are funded mostly by the tobacco settlement. And a lot of the tobacco money goes to soil and water conservation that we enjoy. Some of it even goes to child programs for insurance and things. So it's a mix. Now think about it. If we cut it off, and I agree that it's a health problem. People that smoke and get themselves in a situation where they're sick and wind up in medical care. But that money is funding a lot of programs, and it also contributes to the state coffers. Now, we could snap our fingers maybe if we could and get rid of it tomorrow, and I'd have to ask, are you all willing to pick up the difference? Everybody's got a right. If they want to smoke that product, that ought to be them. If they chew that tobacco or whatever. I think it's a problem that's taking care of itself because what I see today, most of your restaurants are smoke-free. The ones that still have smoking have asked me to please do not support the smoking ban because their customers, their patrons, go to that place because they know they can sit there and drink a beer and smoke a cigarette. That's what they like. We are in America yet, folks. We do have our rights. We also have obligations. We don't hear a lot about, I got my obligation, but we do. We've got an obligation to think of others too, and that goes both ways. So I wouldn't support a statewide smoking ban. I do support education on what smoking can do to a person that overindulges. But that's my position. I'm happy to share it with you.
Thank you. Next is Representative Rican.
Thank you. Just to add, I think Dr. Nicholson said it better than I could possibly say it. It has to do with the health risks and the future of our young people. And I will vote for the most comprehensive health smoking ban that we can get on the floor.
Thank you. Next is Representative Bacon.
As I said earlier, I'm on the Public Health Committee, and this has already come to committee, and we've listened to all of the testimony. So we'll be looking at other things next week. It'll come up, and it's a very passionate position to have on either side. One of the ladies came up to me and she even apologized for being so passionate about it, and I told her she should not be. She needs to be passionate, even though I don't agree with her position. But she needs to be passionate about it, so we need to have a good working relationship. I'm a respiratory therapist, and I smoked until 1984. And from the day I was born, my whole family smoked. So secondhand smoke was what I was breathing, from the day I was born until I took up smoking as everyone else did in my family at 11. And people look at me. And then I went to respiratory therapy school, learned what bad smoking was, as Dr. Nicholson is aware, and I continued to smoke, take care of my patients, tell them how bad they were, and watch the physicians come down and sit down on their bed with a cigar going and lit. It was capable of doing it at that time. It wasn't illegal to do that, and tell them they shouldn't smoke. You know, and it's bad for them. It's going to cause them to have heart attacks, lung cancer, all kinds of things. And we were just smoking away. In 1984, I quit. And I had everyone has to have a good reason to quit, and I quit because my youngest daughter told me I stunk, and she didn't want to have anything to do with me. So she still doesn't have a whole lot to do with me now, but at least I don't stink. And I did quit, so we have to have that. So I truly, truly have taken care of many, many patients for 43 years that smoked, and that was my job, and to make it better. And I understand the health hazards behind it, but I also am a business owner. Smoking tobacco is a legal drug. My concern is, why are we allowing a legal, or telling people they can't do something that's legal? And I realize that. Now, on the health side, I understand what we're after. We need to protect our children. On the restaurants, I have a little bit different view on this also. I think maybe we should ban it in restaurants, because we do have the obligation of bringing our children into a safe environment, and if we want to go there. But there are certain places we don't take our children to. Casinos, they're not allowed to be in there. Bars, they're not allowed to be in there. So then we make our choices of where we want to go, where we as an individual want to go, and not our children. If I want to go to a bar, and I don't because I can't breathe. Since I've quit smoking, I have this asthma problem, and it's gotten worse and worse and worse. It's as I told the other lady, this is where I am on this. The other thing is the casinos, and I realize we're in a recession. We've got a problem with taxes, and I did ask her this question, and it's something I have to think about. I don't know. I put her on the spot because she testified, and I thought she was there to be on the spot. If we lose 94, I can't remember the exact number, but I think it's at least $94 million in casino revenue that's in our tax base, where are you wanting us to cut the rest of our programs in the rest of our state to make up that $94 billion? What program do you want me to cut to make up the difference in that revenue? That's something I've got to think about, and I need the input on that. So that's my stance. I haven't made a complete stance on it yet, but I doubt that I would support a complete ban, because we can't afford it. But we need to work on what we can and cannot do. And I'm not going to violate, we need to quit regulating the businesses that have a right to do something that's legal.
Thank you. We are out of time. I'd like to thank everybody for being here, our legislators. As I've said many times, Mitchell Legislators session without legislators doesn't work very well. But we also appreciate you. So thank you. There is still an opportunity before you leave to take your trash and your empty cups toward my left over here, and maintain use of the donation jars. And I would suggest that those of you who want to make comments provide those in writing to your legislators. Thank you.